It's a very pivotal time now for humanity. There's a massive shift in energy that began in 2012, where basically an age did come to an end. You know, the Mayan calendar talks about the end of an age, but basically what happened then was that the Earth collectively decided to shift to a kind of higher level of consciousness. So a lot of people are going to feel a lot of energy surges, a lot of physical symptoms, and people call it the solar flash, the 3 days of dark. This is a universal theme. This happens on lots of planets. And then, you know, the consciousness gets to a certain level where the planet chooses what the next stage of its evolution is. So I decided to come back here to Earth because I knew it was this planet was going through this type of experience. And it's a great honor to come here. There's a risk because you lose your memories and you could get trapped here.
I am so happy to have Kion here with me today. And Kion has had a plethora of spiritual experiences that he wanted to come and share with us. Kion, thank you so much for coming to be my guest. I'm really excited to hear about what you have to say.
Thanks, Tia. I'm really delighted to be with you as well. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you. So yeah, I've had so many experiences over the last, I would say 30, 35 years that I thought it'd be useful to share with your audience. I've had out of body experiences throughout my whole life. The first one I had now that I remember was when I was 8 years old. But my most recent one was actually a couple of weekends ago. And really the message I've been getting is that it's a very pivotal time now for humanity. There's a massive shift in energy that began in 2012, where basically an age did come to an end. You know, the Mayan calendar talks about the end of an age, but basically what happened then was that the Earth collectively decided to shift to a kind of higher level of consciousness. And one of my books is called Exit Darkness, Enter Light, which was actually published in 2012. And what happened in 2012 was the Earth decided to kind of become a service to other planet, and that would be what its destiny would be in the forthcoming future. So there's an intensification of that energy as the Earth shifts to that. A lot of people are calling it ascension. You know, a lot of people are predicting, you know, massive changes, you know, 3 days of darkness, all of this sort of stuff. But there is just going to be an energetic shift. And I had an out of body experience a couple of weekends ago. I wasn't expecting it, but I was actually pulled out of my body and I just saw that there's a lot of new energy shifting around the Earth. What I would call it is a higher level frequency grid now, which is going to enable a higher level of consciousness to remain on the planet for a longer period of time, because it's in the past it's been quite difficult because of the vibration and the frequency the Earth has been suppressed. But that's kind of being loosened now and more energies are coming in. So that's going to allow a high level of frequency and kind of consciousness to remain on the Earth for a longer period. And that's in line with the shift. So a lot of people are going to feel a lot of energy surges, a lot of physical symptoms. And I've got friends and people I know who've talked to me about some of the physical signs that they're getting. Obviously, some of them are not so into kind of the awakening and spirituality, so I can't really explain to them too much what's happening, but a lot of them experiencing massive shifts. And you probably know about the Lions portal, which happened back in August, and there's massive shifts going on astrologically and in terms of astronomy as well. So there's a lot of an alignment, and I've had some messages that I've wanted to share now. My kind of journey began, a long time ago. I was born in Iran in 1976, and that's kind of going to be quite important to remember because that kind of confirmed a lot of things that I kind of experienced early on, which I wasn't sure about, because I think a lot of the audience will relate. When you have these sort of experiences initially, you're kind of doubting it. You're not sure whether to follow it or not. So, but then you learn to listen to it and realize that actually there is something higher level communicating with you, and it is something that's trying to guide you to a high level of awareness. And then you begin to trust a bit more in that, and a lot of things get kind of revealed to you.
Well, I want to talk about this out of body experience where you had kind of a vision of energy shifting. When you say you saw the energy shifting, what do you mean? Can you go a little bit deeper into that for me?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the planet, we have our own energy chakra system. So we've got seven chakras, the highest one being the crown chakra, which is a violet ray. And then we have the root chakra, which kind of emits infrared kind of red color. So the Earth itself has an energy grid. Some people call it ley lines. It's also been called dragon lines. But when I kind of left my body, it wasn't something that I was planning because I'm able to leave my body if I want to. There's a technique that I use that I can talk about in more detail, which I've learned over the years. But a couple of weekends ago, I wasn't expecting to leave my body. I fell asleep and then I woke up with a jolt and I saw myself above my bed. And then I sort of just shot into the kind of space above the kind of the area where I live, and I could just see that there was all these different points across the planet aligning in a different configuration, which means that there's a different energy pattern that's able to come into the Earth and be held within the Earth's kind of grid, if you like. Because all planets have an energy grid that you can't see with your physical eyes, but if you go into your kind of astral form, some people call it, or your kind of more subtle energy form, you can actually retain more information and see more of the reality that's in the universe because you're able to access levels of frequency, sight, sound that you wouldn't through a physical kind of perspective, but through the astral realm, there's more information that you can retain and kind of perceive. So basically, I was seeing a shift and a more of an alignment in the energy around the planet, and a kind of a coming together of different portals that hasn't happened before. It's not completely finished yet, but I could see that it's forming a new pattern, which is going to enable some big shifts physically that we're going to start experiencing now. And some of it's probably going to be quite unsettling and disorientating for people in the physical, because everything begins in the spiritual realm, and it starts in the spiritual realm first, and then there's a physical manifestation of that. So I just saw a huge amount of grids changing. It's very hard to explain in the physical, but it was just a realignment of the different points of the Earth and how the pattern of it looks energetically to what it was before. It was like a shifting of a Rubik's cube, if you can imagine it like that, but a spherical one. It was just moving different points. And then it was only for a few, it's difficult to measure how long in time it was, but I guess it might have been for a few minutes, but it felt like a few seconds. And then I was straight back into my body. And then I just woke up and I just felt a huge amount of heat around my body and and I was actually drenched in sweat as well. So I know it was kind of like a huge amount of energy that I experienced. So that's what happened a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't as intense as some of the other ones I had, but it was just very much a message that the shift's really beginning to take hold now. That's the message I was getting.
Some of these things that we're happening or that we're seeing happen on the planet since probably 2020, maybe a little even sooner than that, is that a result of this shift that's taking place?
Yeah, well, basically, what's happening here, and I describe myself now as what I would call a wanderer. And a wanderer is a soul that kind of travels the cosmos and incarnates on planets that are going through a shift from one frequency level or one density to a higher level of density. And that's why I chose to come to Earth when I was born in the I was born in the late, I was born in 1976, and I chose to come to Earth. Now I realize why, because of that. And one of the reasons is because all planets throughout the cosmos go through these shifts when there's a readiness for it. And it's a shift in consciousness to a higher level of awareness. And that's been kind of the what's been going on the earth for a long time now. It really intensified from 2012, a lot of people were expecting something because the Mayan calendar was meant to end in 2012, but basically all planets like Earth go through what I call cycles. The Earth's particular one is tied to the precession of the equinoxes, the changes in the kind of the constellations, which happens every 26,000 years, and within that there are many cycles of about 5 to 6,000 years, and these are periods or epochs where the Earth goes through certain changes and configurations of energy, and that's 2012 was the ending of a big major one. And the earth was meant to shift into a higher state of consciousness, which there's some lots of teachings about this, but some people will call it service to other density or understanding, and there's a service to self frequency. You could think of it as like light and dark, whether the planet is going to be more about sharing and love and a more heart-centered kind of form of existence, or what we've kind of seen, which has been more self-oriented, more materialistic, the denial of the spiritual kind of reality. So that happened in 2012. There was an ending. And what really happened was that the kind of repressive energies that have been, vying for consciousness of Earth, trying to pull it into kind of more negative frequency or keep it within a negative frequency range, were kind of told to leave the planet so that humanity as a species could make its own choice without too much manipulation and influence. And you might have heard other people talk about this as well. So that's what happened in 2012, and it's accelerated since then. And obviously, there was a lot of things that happened in 2020. There was the kind of global pandemic and other things that went on, but all of that was part of a kind of an awakening process. And that's what is continuing to carry on. And it's going to carry on for the next 2 or 3 years, but it's really going to intensify in the next 2 or 3 years, where it's going to become more and more obvious to people who may not have even been aware of it, that there is something that's shifting on the earth. And there are, more and more people kind of seeing UFOs. More and more people are more open to this. Like when I published my book back in 2012, a lot of the ideas in that book were quite new, but now a lot more people would be able to read that book and actually get what the message was than probably even in 2012. So you're right, there has been a shift, and it's accelerating, it's speeding up.
What are some of the things that we can expect so we can kind of start preparing ourselves for them?
The key thing is, the choice is an individual choice. It's your soul's choice. No one can take the burden of another soul. No one can enslave or even guide another soul. Ultimately, every soul makes its own choices. And that will happen through thousands of lifetimes, through various cycles of time. And really, through those lifetimes, you'll make continuous choices. And these choices amount to two things on this level of consciousness. The choice is simple. Do you choose to be service to other, or are you choosing to be service to yourself? They're both experiences that you can have in the universe. There is no kind of, they're both ways of learning and developing and evolving as a spiritual being, because the physical reality is just a tool for the evolution of your spirit and your soul. And really, what people can do is just to prepare for their choice, because what they're going to see more and more over the next 6 months to a year is a massive transformation on a planet, and a polarization as these two choices become much more obvious. And then people can see, well, actually, those communities over there where people are trying to live in balance with nature, they're trying to share more, they're trying to live more healthy, kind of meaningful lifestyles. And there's another group over there that want to be tied into the monetary system. They want to, have all of their actions monitored by surveillance. It's going to become much more obvious, the two splitting of the pathways. And essentially, the difference is, when you choose the service to self path, essentially what you're doing is you're giving your power away, and you're living in a form of enslavement to other beings that you give your power to, and they get to control you and set the rules by which you live. Service to others is much more equal. It's much more kind of balanced. It's much more in harmony. And you can see, that these philosophies and these ways of living on the earth through the last few thousand years, this is not a new concept. It's been on the earth for thousands of years, and these choices through the cycles of time have always been open to the individual soul. And now Earth as a collective planet has decided that it's going to stay service to other, which I think is, the first time even in Earth's history. So it's an amazing time to be here. And it made that decision in 2012. So this is going to be a planet that's going to be on a high level of consciousness, directed at service to others. So it's important for people who are watching this to kind of be clear about the choice and to make the choice. And it's something that they'll know deep within themselves what they choose, and no one else can really determine it for you. It's an individual thing, and everyone is going to be where they need to be. And it's not anything about punishment or judgment, it's just where your soul wants to be and what it wants to experience. And the reason I know about all of this is because I can talk more about my own soul history, if you like, and some of the things I learned in my past that have kind of led me to this understanding. So it's been both theoretical, but also, something that I know without any doubt, because it's been something I've directly experienced myself. But everyone's experience will be slightly varied based on their own soul journey and what they need to see for that moment in their evolution.
And I want to talk about your past experience and how you came to know all these things. But briefly, before we get there, it sounds to me like this is going to be something that is slow, like a slow progression, not something that happens overnight. So
Yeah.
we will be able to see things coming and prepare for them and make sure that we're on the right path.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, these cycles and the shifts to the other, some people talk about in philosophy and mythology, there's the different ages of, humanity. There's the golden age, there's the iron age, in the Hindu understanding, there's Kali Yuga. These are periods and epochs, and they take, hundreds, if not thousands of years to solidify in the direction that they need to go. So the transformation will probably take about 100 years to really come into the swing. We're probably at the beginning of it, but it's going to intensify and then it will kind of peak out. So the next fight, and it's begun since 2012 and even further back than that. But you're right, it's not going to be a massive overnight shift, but there will be more and more noticeable things that will happen, and the earth will align itself more with the new reality that it wants. So there'll be a purging by the earth. One of the things I do is I write a lot of poetry. And when I have my out of body experiences, I try and write down poetry as soon as I've had them, because it's very difficult to retain memory of some of those experiences beyond a certain point of time, because you go back into the physical shell and it's much more limited, the bandwidth that you can kind of explain things and see things. So I try and write things down. And a lot of people do this through channeling and automatic writing. So I do similar stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but people are going to feel the intensity of that shift. And that polarization is going to become more and more obvious to people.
One of the reasons you're able to kind of ascertain all this knowledge, you've had a lifetime of spiritual experiences.
The way I understand it is that the simplest way to explain it is that the human being is a body type. So, it's called the Adam Kadam body type. So, you have the concept of Adam in the Bible, but what my understanding is that this body type is called the Adam Kadam body type. It's a body type. You have beings that will have an insectoid appearance. You'll have beings that have a reptilian experience, kind of body type. You'll have variations on the human body type. Have tall Nordic type beings. You might have some of the other types of extraterrestrials people have seen. So it's the body type, and that soul will have an experience that, and that body type will be best suited for the kind of level of that soul and what it wants to experience. So you're right. I've had lots of experiences, but I was born in 1976 in Iran, and my parents and my family moved to the UK when I was 6 months old. So I had quite a kind of unusual, difficult childhood. Kind of being in a different country, and even my parents spoke English very well, so I had to kind of really support my younger brothers and sisters. Well, my first experience was when I was 8 years old. I remember I woke up late at night and I had this urge to go out into the garden. And I went out into the garden and just looked at the stars, and I saw a strange light in the kind of sky. And it was like it was trying to communicate with me, because I was looking at it and it was moving in a way that wasn't an aircraft. It wasn't like a normal star. It was definitely an object, and it was reacting to my thoughts. And I was only 8 years old. I didn't really understand what it meant, but it just gave me the sense that, there is you're here for a reason. Because even though when I was growing up, I was quite different to my younger brothers and sisters, I kind of, I used to draw spaceships all the time. I used to talk a lot about other planets to my mum, and she just look at me like I'm, you know, what are you talking about, sort of things. So they were brought up in Islam, the Muslim faith, and but they were quite open with me. They didn't kind of ask me to be, believing in one religion. So as I got older, I tried not to think about these things so much, because you go to school, you go to work, and then go to university and all of this sort of stuff. But I had a number of experiences throughout my life that always jolted me back into a spiritual type of path. And I guess, when I was in my late teens, I was kind of going through a few difficulties. I was trying to find my path, growing up as a guy, it has its own challenges. And I was kind of, going down a bad route. I wasn't really studying. I was going out night clubbing and doing sort of things when you're 17, 18, you can do, but you should do it in balance. And I remember wasn't really paying attention to my studies. And I had a car at the time. I was driving around a lot, and I used to think it was cool not to wear a seatbelt and all of this sort of silly things that you look back on now and think, why was I doing that? But I remember I was getting into quite a kind of state where I wasn't really focusing at that point in my life. And I remember then I had a mobile phone. And back then it was like one of the first mobile phones that were available. and I just pulled over to speak on my mobile phone to someone who'd called me, and a police car drove past me as I was stopped for a minute. And it was really strange. I put my mobile phone away and then I drove off. And then for the first time, I thought, actually, I better put my seatbelt on because I'd just seen a police car. I thought, oh, maybe, because it's not legal not to have a seat. You have to have a seatbelt when you're driving. So I put it on. And then literally 2 or 3 minutes after that, I crashed into the back of a bus and a car crashed into the back of me. So if I hadn't had my seatbelt on, it could have been pretty horrific because I would have probably gone through the windscreen and probably had a really really bad accident. But luckily, I just had some a bit of whiplash and I had a bruise across my chest from where the seatbelt had kind of held me and stopped me kind of going through the windscreen. But that forced me to study because I didn't have my car got written off, so I couldn't drive anymore. So it forced me to kind of, and I felt like the end of my life at the time because I had to stay at home, but it forced me to study and to kind of, look into reading and other stuff. And that enabled me to go to university because I did quite well on my A levels and went to university. So there was different moments in my life that have put me on the right path and kept me there. And I eventually kind of, when I went to university, ended up studying a PhD in new religious and spiritual movements. And the reason I chose that was because, in my kind of late teens and early 20s, I was just really interested in spirituality. I kind of had I kept having what you would call sleep paralysis. There was times that I would wake up back then and I would feel my body's paralyzed and it would be scary to me. And I didn't understand what was happening to me. And this all kind of came to a head in the year 2000. Um, this was just before I decided to do a PhD, where I went on holiday to Malta and I stayed in somewhere called Valletta. And it was just a normal holiday. I was there for a few weeks. And that was the night that I had my first real out of body experience. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and then looking down on my bed and looking down and seeing my body on the bed. And I could see that my body was connected with a silver cord to my energy body. And it was strange because my arms were outstretched and my feet were outstretched, but there was some dark energy that was holding my arms and my legs. And I was panicking because I couldn't get back into my body. I didn't know what was going on. And then I just remember the ceiling evaporating in the kind of a hotel room that I was in. And I just shot up into kind of outer space. And then I didn't know at the time, but that was one of my first encounters with what you could call interdimensional extraterrestrial. I kind of think interdimensional, it probably makes more sense in the sense that they're on a higher level or higher frequency level. That's why UFOs come in and out of our reality because they're coming from a higher dimension. They're materializing in this dimensional and they're not bound by the laws of physics and the laws that we're prone to on this level. That's why they can do things that are kind of, like magic or, really unusual. So, I had an experience then, and for about a year or so after that, I felt very frightened. I had quite a lot of anxiety because I'd had a bad experience. I'll explain what the experience was in a bit, but basically for about a year or two after that, I kind of suffered from a bit of anxiety, and I'd never had that before. I just felt very kind of, I felt like there was a dark energy, and the sleep paralysis had become something frightening to me. So anyway, that culminated, led to me doing a PhD. I got funded to do that, and I wanted to study new religious and spiritual movements because I was obsessed with different types of religious and spiritual. I just wanted to know what the meaning of life was, what the purpose was, because I knew there was something more than the physical reality and not the experience in Malta had kind of confirmed that to me. But it hadn't been a positive or an empowering experience. It had been quite a frightening one. So I ended up doing my PhD, and for 6 months of it, I did field research. So I went to the US. So I actually went to California. I spent time in Los Angeles, and I went to Mount Shasta because I was drawn to Mount Shasta. Now I know why, because Mount Shasta, I mentioned before, the Earth has got energy points, and it's got places of power where positive and also negative energy can be amplified. And Mount Shasta is one of them. Mount Shasta, some people believe, is the crown chakra of the Earth. It's a very famous mountain in kind of Northern California. Then I didn't know this, but I just had this feeling inside me. And now I also know that Valletta in Malta is a vortex, which has traditionally been quite a negative vortex and associated with kind of dark power and dark energy. I know that now. Then I didn't know these things. I was still trying to understand what was happening. But I went to Mount Shasta in 2004 as part of my PhD to do field research, and I was just drawn there. And I spent a few nights at the mountain and had an amazing awakening and experience. And I was in contact at the time with a shaman who I'd connected with on an online forum, and we'd exchanged emails. And he was also quite influential in me going to visit Mount Shasta, because I was on a forum which was really discussing spiritual matters and out of body experiences and stuff like that back then. And he was on the forum, and he was very knowledgeable. It was Samuel, who was his name. He was an amazing guy, and we were just kind of in contact for a while. And then when I went to Mount Shasta, he happened to kind of be there as well. He lived in the kind of city, and we ended up meeting up, and kind of in the city. He had a shop there which kind of sold crystals and other stuff, which was really new age. And I was obviously studying some of the new age movements, and I was looking at, because I was cataloging different types of movements. So we kind of got speaking, and then over a couple of days, he introduced me to something called ayahuasca, and I think that's become much more common now. It's a medicinal thing that people might use to have awakenings and other stuff. But you've got to use these things with a caution, because it does open the doorway. So anyway, we kind of had a ritual that he organized on the mountain, and then he left me at the mountain, and he kind of sensed that there was something that I needed to discover. He said to me, "There's something you need to learn about yourself, and then that will help you." And he was into kind of the spiritual understanding that the American Indians have, and all of these kind of beliefs that they have. So he's very much into the spirit and the great spirit, and he understood that was a spiritual realm. So he was someone very kind of wise. He wasn't like the people I was used to speaking to that didn't really believe in a kind of greater spiritual reality. And that experience I had that night on Mount Shasta, I kind of, had the ayahuasca. There's a couple of days of fasting I had to do before that to purge my body of any toxins. And even then, you still have a strong reaction to it when you take it. And I had an amazing experience that night. I saw a huge column of light from Mount Shasta, like, because then it was an energy vortex, as I said. Now I know it's the crown chakra of the earth. I saw a massive energy from around the mountain and from within the mountain, and that enabled me to see into my kind of energy field, because we all have a physical body, but we have an energy body as well, and an energy field. So some people call it the aura. I think psychics are able to see some parts of your energy field, so they can tell you about memories that have been important to you, people that, because you store things in your energy field, like your memories, your past lives, your experiences. So I was able to access my energy field because the ayahuasca really opened my perception. And then I realized the experience I'd had in Malta was with what some people would call the Draco, or reptilian, a kind of reptilian species, and they're associated with negativity. But I said it's more the body type. The reptilian body type is quite warrior-like. It's quite well suited for being dominant. So those types of planets with reptilian types of beings tend to be a service to other type planet. They tend to be much more warlike, much more materialistic, much more might is right. You see the philosophy here on Earth a little bit as well, because they influence Hinduism. So the caste system came from kind of those sort of ideas from the reptilians. And in the Hindu mythology, you have the Nagas, which were reptilian beings that influence a lot of their kind of ancient culture. They've been on the planet, they've had lots of influence on the Earth. And there's actually a reptilian species that lives deep within the Earth, which was actually here before humanity. But that's a really different story we can get to. But I had an experience with a Draco because I'd had a previous life as one of those beings, and I accessed some of my other previous lives on Earth in different times, in history, and also I managed to access a lot of my other memories as well. And that being had made contact with me when I was in Malta. It had taken me against my will, because, as I said, I understand now that my soul's a wanderer. So it was kind of trying to make a connection to me, and was trying to basically, I guess the best way I can describe it is to not let me share any knowledge and other stuff, because the aim of some of these beings is to keep humanity limited in its consciousness, and not to give humanity enough information for individuals to awaken to who they are and to understand the greater reality that we live in. And so it contacted me, but I realized that I'd refused its offer of not I'd refused to cooperate with it. And because it contacted me because of my previous soul connection to that type of life and that level, and I was able to integrate the fear. So the fear went after that. I integrated it and understood it as a part of me. So we all have the potential for light and dark within us. and it's just what we choose to experience, which is that you always have the choice. The choice is always within you, but you can choose to be light or dark, and that's always the choice you have. But the power's within you. So, and then I realized, okay, that my mission here is to share my knowledge, and that's what led to my publication of my book in 2012. Exit darkness, enter light, because I became more and more aware of what was happening on Earth and what was going to happen in the future. I didn't have all of the answers because you're not giving all of the answers, but through other experiences I had a couple of other out of body experiences. I was able to retain some of that information and channel it through and wrote it into my books and my poems. And then I published my book in 2012. And then I kind of went into a little bit of what I would call stasis. I don't know if the best way to explain that. I kind of felt like I've done what I need to do in terms of my soul contract. I need to let the earth and humanity kind of, the ideas are out there. The way I see it is I created a ripple, as did thousands of other humans, the others that come. It's not just me that's a wanderer. There's lots from other star systems and other places that have come to Earth and have awakened in different ways. But I did my part, which was write this book and share knowledge. And I did some music at the time as well. And a lot of it then was probably quite unusual. Whereas now, you've probably seen yourself here, there's a lot more interest in all of this and a lot more understanding around, the spiritual realm and the fact that we're spiritual beings, not physical beings. So things caught up a little bit. And now my second book, funnily enough, even though I started writing it in 2013, was called Transformation. And my understanding now is that my second book will be published later this year because the time's right now. It will have a lot of information about what's going to happen in the next few years in that book. And I can speak a bit more openly about it because my first book was written as science fiction, because if people had read it, they would have probably thought it was really kind of unusual and probably wouldn't have been able to really read it as something that was based on some sort of understanding of reality. But if your audience were going to check it out, they'd probably see some of the themes that they're, seeing now written, over 12 years ago now. So it was all there back in 2012 when it was published. So the second book's called Transformation, and I've got a book of poetry called Zen Reflections that I've also published as well, which again is about helping people unlock their own spiritual memories and their own kind of understanding as well. So all you can do really is help put seeds. And when I mentioned about the ripple, you can drop a seed into an ocean and that ripple might kind of disturb the ocean a little bit. And that's how I see consciousness, as a connected sea.
And we're all connected, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Ultimately, we're all one.
We're all one, yeah. And that's what a lot of the American Indian nations, they believe the law of one, and even going back to the times of Atlantis, there used to be something called the law of the school of one, where we're all one, and this goes back to even, the kind of the philosophy between light and dark. So there's the law of school of one, and then you have the sons of Belial. You could call it, I guess, in a way, modern Satanism or whatever you want to say. There's people like Aleister Crowley and Anton LaVey and all of these sort of characters that came in and sort of started talking about, being very self-serving. And that's just a service to self philosophy. And they made contact with interdimensional beings that were of a higher level, but were of that philosophy. And you're seeing that more and more, people realizing that, our governments, our way of work, and, the kind of, the so-called richest people on the planet, or, the Illuminati, all of these things that people are calling them, they're just in line with a service to self philosophy. That's all it is. And ultimately what they've done is given their own individual sovereignty and power way to a higher kind of being, or you could call it the devil, or what, sold their soul, whatever you want to call it. That's what they've done. They've just given away their power. And I think what's important is not to do that, and for everyone to retain their power. And all light is knowledge. That's all light is. It shows you everything. So if you're in a room and it's, you turn the light on, you see everything good and bad in that room. And that's the difference between light and dark. It's just knowledge, and using that knowledge to help others, and to kind of uplift others. That's the only real difference. But the room's still the room. It's in darkness. And that's the thing. Your soul can resonate and tap into either of these frequencies. And we're going to see more of that as the earth rises in energy. People are going to be forced to be pushed in a way internally to make that choice, or that choice is going to become even more obvious to them because we're at that critical point now.
What happens if they don't choose to ascend?
If they don't choose, my understanding is that they'll live out the rest of their life, and then they'll be reborn on another planet and probably start a cycle again. So they are ready to make that choice. Everyone is where they need to be. There's no punishment, there's no judgment. Like I said, even the light and dark, it's a choice. So, even the dark beings, they've made a choice. I respect the choice. I may not agree with it, but it's a choice and it's an experience at the highest levels. Because, in Sufism, um, because when I studied a lot of the religions, there's a lot of good things in a lot of the religions of the books. So, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrian. All of these religions have an element of knowledge that they're trying to share with you. Over time, obviously, that's been changed or moved or tampered and all of that sort of stuff. But all of these religious systems had a mystical strand alongside it. So, for example, with Islam, you had Sufism. Now, the Sufis, talk about God or the creator in a way that's really beautiful. And it just, their view of the creator or God, if you want to call it that, was that it was an energy or a love that wanted to know itself. And what it did was it exploded itself. So you could think of that maybe as the universe or, Big Bang, whatever you want to call it scientifically. And in order to experience itself and not to feel alone, it created fragments of itself to go out and to reflect back to it what it was. So all of those, fragments of itself, you could think as us, divine souls, that have been exploded from this, all-knowing wise being, just to reflect back to what it is. And ultimately what it was love, because it created everything else for an act of love, unconditional love. And all it wants is for you to experience through the different dimensions, the different levels, the different planets, and just to give it back and reflect back to it so it can understand itself better. So, the creator is an ultimate mystery, but that's the way, best way I can think of understanding which Sufism is, kind of shared with humanity.
Switching gears and going back to all of your experiences for a minute, you said this, you unlock some memories. That must have been mind blowing for you to unlock memories.
It is really it was pretty disorientating. I was lucky because I was very well prepared for the ayahuasca. There's a lot more people doing ayahuasca. There's a lot more spiritual retreats happening now. Even back in 2012, it wasn't that common, but there's a lot more people doing it now. And even in Europe now, there's a lot more people going on spiritual retreats. But if you're not ready, it can really, because basically what it does is it opens the doorways to your crown chakra, your pineal gland, or whatever you want to kind of physically imagine it as. It opens your perception. So essentially, what it does, the reason you need to purify your body is because your energy chakras, the seven, they need to be in balance. And when they're in balance and you're balanced, then you're sort of settled, you're able to bring in the information in a much more objective, less judgmental way. If you're out of balance, or if one chakra is dominating the other, and there's a lot of misaligned chakras because there's a lot of bombardment of the lower chakras in this level of reality. So they want to keep you in your base chakra, which is all about survival. So constantly, fear, constantly making you worry about money and survival. They bombard you with the lower chakras because they don't want you to have the experience to align all of them and reach alignment, which is alignment with your crown chakra. So I was lucky in a way because I went through the right steps to have the experience. I did the fasting, I did the other stuff. I had someone who was a guide and an expert, and he kind of explained to me what might happen. Although even though when it happened, it was quite a shock. And I remember when he told me he's going to leave me there by myself on the mountain for the night. I was like, okay, thanks for that. I mean, it was like a camping place and stuff like that, but it was still kind of, I wasn't expecting that. But the experience at the time I had it, it was like visions came to me, and I realized, and I saw images of past lives, if you like, and kind of, but I knew it was me, and I knew it was part of me. And for a long, I would say, after the ayahuasca began to wear, because it wears off after a number of hours, and the next day, I just felt like I was dreaming for about, I would say, 2 weeks. I felt like nothing felt real. I just felt like I was almost like observing myself from a higher point of view. It didn't. It got to the point actually that a couple of times I almost just walked in front of the road and I didn't really care if a car hit me. Not because I was trying to hurt myself, but it was because it felt surreal. The physicality didn't feel real. It just felt like a shell. So it was really disorientating for a while. But luckily, um, I also started doing Falun Gong. I'd been doing Falun Gong for about 3 or 4 months before I went there because it was one of the spiritual movements I was studying. Falun Gong's a kind of Qigong system. It's an energy cultivation system. It's been repressed in China now because obviously China's a communist state, but the practitioners, they kind of develop an energy cultivation system. And again, Falun Gong helps you align your energy. So I'd been doing this for a couple of months even before I went away. It's almost like I'd been guided to do it. So after I came back, I carried on doing it. So it wasn't too shocking, but I've got good friends who've had similar experiences. They've unlocked memories from past lives, and it's really completely destroyed their lives. Some of them have gone through major depressions, massive life shifts. Has really just kind of taken them completely out of their normal reality. But for me, it was just I had this surreal feeling for about, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks where, but then it slowly wore off with time.
And you said that you're kind of a wanderer. You come to planets when there's major shifts going on. So, in these past life experiences or memories that you experience, were they lives on Earth or were they on other planets?
There was two lives on Earth. One was during the era of what people would call Lemuria and Atlantis, and there was a big conflict between those two kind of planetary, planetary civilizations, if you like. And people talk about the fall of it. And there was a massive conflict that went on there, and the energy system and the kind of technology then was actually more advanced than it is now. They had a different type of, they called it the night side. They had a different understanding of energy and levitation and gravity than we do now. So I had a lifetime during that era, and I had another lifetime as a reptilian being on Earth. So Earth was actually my first physical land, but this was during the reptilians were here on Earth before humanity. People talk about the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were meant to have evolved long before humans. There was a type of dinosaur that evolved to become reptilian, but then humans were brought here as an experiment by what people call the Nordics or the Palladians. And they kind of created humanity, or had a hand in creating humanity from a hominid species here. So the reptilian beings were already here. They weren't very happy about that. So that's why there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the reptilians. There's an indigenous reptilian species, and there's a kind of interdimensional one, which is called the Draco, that are much more negative. The ones that are indigenous to Earth, they're kind of a bit more neutral to humans. They don't really interfere in our business, and they don't really want us interfering in theirs. And they live in certain areas on the planet, and they've got space. They had space technology a long time before we did. But so I had a lifetime as a reptilian on Earth, and one during Atlantis. And yeah, so I kind of had memories of other planets and other places. The reason we forget, or what you forget on this level, you go through something called the Sea of Oblivion or the Veil of Forgetfulness, and the reason you do is because it could cause a lot of problems for you because you come here for a specific reason and message. So it's a risk you take. So as a wanderer, there's others who are on the planet, probably similar. A lot of people on this planet are wanderers. There's been a massive influx of them. And I think Dolores Cannon, she used to speak a lot about this as well. So if your audience are interested, her books talk a lot more about this. There's different groups that came here to help share knowledge. And that's what I came here for, because in this planet, what it's going through is not new. It's happened in other places in the universe, other galaxies. Planets get to a certain level of consciousness, and then they make their choice, and they go through an awakening. And people call it the solar flash, the 3 days of dark. This is a universal theme. This happens on lots of planets. And then, the consciousness gets to a certain level where the planet chooses what the next stage of its evolution is. So I decided to come back here to Earth because I knew this planet was going through this type of experience. And it's a great honor to come here. There's a risk because you lose your memories and you could get trapped here. And that's always been a risk as well. You could, basically, people talk about karma. It's not really, basically, you've got to pay the cost of the choices you make. That's the easiest way to understand karma. And if you do bad choices or harmful choices to others, then there's a cost you need to pay for that. So there's a risk with losing your memory of your past lives and coming onto a planet like that. And some may not really remember they even came here as a wanderer. So it really varies. But yeah, so that's, I've had lots of experiences on other planets, but I'm not special. We all have. We've all had those experiences. We've all had that. It's just it takes practice and it takes commitment, I guess, to unlock those memories. A lot of people do it through meditation. You can do it through certain types of rituals, but everyone has the ability to access their memories and access their energy field. And you just need to really prepare your physical body, make sure your energy chakras are aligned. Eat the right sort of foods, keep your body free of toxins, and you need to meditate, and you need to do certain practices, and it will come initially. You'll get it through probably dreams and then visions during meditation, and then as you're able to kind of leave your body at will. And I learned how to do it through something called hemisync as well. It's like a binaural beat. The Robert Monroe talks a lot about this in his book. He set up the Monroe Institute. He was a kind of well-known person who kind of led the field in out-of-body research. So I used some of those techniques over the years to help me kind of have out-of-body experiences. But I stopped doing that, to be honest, here, because it's difficult to come back because Earth is quite limiting. And when you have experiences outside the body, it's so much more beautiful, and I'm sure some of your audience and maybe your other guests have spoken about this. When you have an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience, you feel a great sense of peace and love because you go into a kind of higher, you access higher realms. There's also danger because you could access lower realms as well. There's always a danger with that. And some people do unfortunately have that in near-death experiences when they go to hellish type realms. There is always the risk of that because where you go, what you might see reflects your consciousness. So you've got to be cautious about that. But it's difficult to come back because it's so, and you'll probably get this over and over again. A lot of people don't want to come back. So it's very hard to have an out-of-body experience. And I don't, it's something I don't really do anymore. I stopped doing it. So for a long time, I stopped because it was very difficult to want to come back. So my view would be if you do go down this path, just get the memory you need. You've got to remember you came here for a reason. You chose to incarnate for a reason. You can help uncover that reason more by accessing your memories, but you came here for a reason. Don't get too distracted by the kind of other realms because you're meant to be here. You chose to be here. There's something you wanted to fulfill here. So that's how I've tried to stop doing it, because if I get too much knowledge of what my lifetimes were, and there's a lot of it in my book, so I could talk for hours about it. There's a lot of it in my book that's kind of explains some of the experiences I've had, but I guess it becomes a distraction in itself if you go too much. It's just, if you see what I mean, it's almost like you're a CD, and when you play a music track on a CD, the laser beam points on the track you want to listen to at that time. The potentiality of all the music tracks are there on the CD, but that laser is pointing at that point in time because that's what you want to listen to, that's what you want to experience. And that's how the soul is. You can access all of this at any time, it's always there, but you're here, your focus is right here, right now, and focus on that. So yeah, it was there's so many experiences I had, but it's, as I said, it can just also be distracting as well. And having an out-of-body experience is quite a challenging thing. It takes a couple of days to recover from it as well, because um, when you go out of your body, you're going into your astral body. The amount of information you can retain in your astral body is much higher. So if you reintegrate back into your physical body and you try and retain all of that memory, it causes a lot of problems to your nervous system because it could fry you basically. So imagine you're having a light bulb. You've got two light bulbs. Your astral body light bulb is like 2000 watts. Your physical body light bulb is 180 watts. So 2000 watts back in there is going to fry it. So that's why it remains outside your energy body. Your energy field kind of remains around you. It's not directly inside your physical, it's around you. And that's why people see things like auras and other stuff around a person. So yeah, so it's just it's not something that's to be done lightly, and yeah, can cause challenges to integrate.
I've had out of body experiences also, and I never have chosen to come back. I'm always forced to come back in some way, shape, or form. It's like I hit a barrier and I can't go any further, or I have a thought in my head and that thought brings me right back. But it's never where I'm like, oh, I better get back home. It's almost time to wake up or anything like that. What do you think having out of body experiences tells us about who we truly are? Because that's one of the reasons I started this podcast. One of my goals is to help people understand that we're so much more than what we think we are, that we've been taught as children, especially if you're in the United States. I don't know what it's like around the world, but there's a culture, and it's not accepting of a lot of the spiritual sides of who we truly are. So when you have an out of body experience, what to you does that mean about who we truly are?
Well, the first time, like I told you, the first experience I had was beyond my control, but it made me fearful because I wasn't in control of the experience, the one I had in Malta. But what it did take away from me was I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there was more to this physical reality than physical. So I knew there was no thing such as death, but it was frightening because I'd experienced something, a greater reality, but it was outside my control because I hadn't induced the out of body experience. I'd been pulled out of my body without my kind of agreement to an extent. But then I realized later on that I had an agreement because I'd had a soul experience in a previous lifetime as a Draco. So there was an agreement on some level there. But you're right. I mean, people don't experience it. And that's a symptom of the level of consciousness. You're here to make a choice. If everyone was born with the knowledge that you're a spiritual being having a physical existence and everyone could easily have an out-of-body experience, then there would be no choice to make. So that's the challenge. That's why it's set up the way it is, because it's meant to be a choice. And basically what it is you get to the higher levels, you have more ability. Consciousness creates matter, not the other way around. A lot of scientists will say, matter, the brain creates consciousness. That's nonsense. Consciousness pre-exists the brain. The brain is just a receiver for consciousness. So basically, what our consciousness shows us, so basically, the brain is just a receiver for different levels of consciousness. So we have the ability. So there's a lot of talk about manifestation and all of this, because when people understand that, they realize that their consciousness or what they believe can influence their reality. So on the higher levels of kind of consciousness or kind of dimensions or experiences, there's still a physicality, but it's a lot more kind of magical. So they can levitate. There's telepathy. But then at those levels, there's an agreement that people don't want to hide or tell lies to each other, so they can read each other's minds. So there's telepathy on the service to other kind of levels. The service itself is a bit different, and it's a much more controlled environment. But to answer your question, if people knew more about it, then and the choice would become less of a choice. It's just become, well, actually, it's obvious. But I think the key thing, the key message is the sense of empowerment it gives you. And I think once, I'm sure all of your guests and others who've had this experience, I've spoken to a couple of people who've had near-death experiences. They're never the same after it. Their view of life completely changes for the better. There might be an initial shock and an adjustment back to reality and an acceptance from others around them. But I think, your site, your kind of channel is amazing because you're doing something that's really important, and that's making people aware that there is more to their physical reality, and that should give them a sense of hope. Because one of the ways that and that's what you'll see, one of the ways that consciousness is kind of repressed is by focusing too much on the physical. So that's why the ones that want to kind of suppress the consciousness and keep it lower, because they feed off that energy, is because they want you to be focused with survival, fearful about, just collecting material possessions. Because if you're stuck in the lower vibration and the lower chakras, the three lower chakras, you're never going to step up and look at the kind of wider picture. So I think your channel and the work you're doing is amazingly important. And I think the work of all the kind of people that are talking and brave enough to speak about their near-death experiences is crucial, because that's going to serve as a blueprint for others that are going to start beginning to experience this. We're going to start seeing more and more stuff that is just going to be very hard to explain away, where be it lights in the sky or UFO. I think there's going to be some sort of probably obvious contact where it becomes completely undeniable that we're alone, probably I think by about, I think 2025, 2026. It was meant to happen sooner than that, but I think the majority of humanity still weren't ready. And as I said, the blueprint of the earth has changed now, according to the experience I had a couple of weeks ago. So it needs to be able to hold that reality. So the earth itself needs to be able to hold two realities at once. And that's why there's going to be this polarization and transformation, because there's still going to be a group of people that are not going to be ready for that reality. And they might have to restart a cycle somewhere else. But the kind of universe is completely fair. So it doesn't want to completely shock that. So basically, what will happen is that they will still be able to live out the remainder of their experience without necessarily having to come into contact with that awareness of, oh yeah, we're not alone, if that makes sense. It's trying to hold the space for both experiences to play out over the next, I think, 50 to 100 years, but then it will have to go the way it needs to go.
Well, it's a certainly a very exciting time to be alive, and I'm glad that I chose to come here at this time because though it's been, I don't even want to use the words. I've been directed not to use certain words, but it's been very expanding.
Mm.
So it's been amazing, and yes, I wouldn't change it for the world. And we're all here for it, and we're all here together. So we need to rely on each other, and we're here to support each other. And so, thank you, Kion. This has been amazing. If my audience wanted to reach out to you, would it be okay?
Absolutely. I'd love to speak to anyone and share experiences and learn from their experiences. I've started a YouTube channel here, so people are welcome to look at that, and hopefully we can put the link to them. But I'm beginning to post more and more videos, and I'll probably start speaking more on my YouTube channel in the next few months. But as I said, I've got books that they're welcome to kind of look at, and they're available. But yeah, happy for them to reach out to me via my YouTube channel, and happy to keep the conversation going and share more of my experiences. But it's been a pleasure speaking to you, because I think what you're doing is really, really important. And as I said, you're really helping people just become more aware of the choice. But everyone knows that deep within themselves. We all know that there's a reason why we're here, and there's something we should be doing. I think everyone knows that. So it's yeah, it's really important what you're doing, giving people the opportunity to share their amazing experiences. Because like, yeah, we're stronger together, and that's the difference between service to other to service to self. You can achieve things much more quickly when you cooperate, and at the highest levels, service to self isn't very common, because you progress and you evolve much quicker. You build a house much quicker if you work with 20 other people. If you build it by yourself, it's going to take a lot longer. It's just simple logic. So that's why it's great that you're doing this, and the more we share and learn from each other, the quicker we all progress and get the planet we want, and the reality we want to experience.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And yeah, people like you sharing your story, you starting your podcast, we're all working on this together, and we're going to see some amazing things happen in our future because we decided to work together and become united. And if you had one message to kind of wrap it all up, what would you want the audience to take away from our conversation today?
I guess the thing would be to not have any fear. Ultimately, you're having an experience, and it's a beautiful experience. Even the dark times and the difficulties are beautiful in themselves. So enjoy every moment. And that's why I write poetry, because, you know, when you write poetry, it gets rid of any negative emotions within you. And it's all just an experience, and just to let go of the heaviness, the heavier kind of vibrations, the heavier emotions, and be optimistic about the future, and enjoy the present moment as much as you can, because that's why we come here, to enjoy present moments, and to enjoy the finite rather than the kind of infinite, because we're infinite beings. So we want to make the most of these finite experiences. So remember, they all has a place, and just enjoy it. And yeah, my biggest message would be not to have any fear, because you're an eternal being, you're a spiritual being having a human experience. I think lots of people have said that before, but that would be my key message.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kian.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.